Hey, welcome. Today we're diving into a really unique theological framework called the Providence of Restoration, which comes from the writings of Myung. It lays out this incredible, repeating pattern in the Bible, a story of divine plans, human failures, and the super long, winding path back to redemption. So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the basic idea of what restoration even means in this context. Then we'll follow this pattern through three major families in Genesis: Adam's, Noah's, and then Abraham's. We're going to see how this cycle of failure finally gets broken, and then we'll wrap up with the big lessons from this whole interpretation. All right, let's jump right in. According to this teaching, the whole story starts with one central problem: the human fall. And in response, God kicks off a master plan, a providence, to restore humanity, to bring us all back to our original intended state. And at the absolute core of this is the providence of restoration. It's a divine plan designed to lay the groundwork for a Messiah. But, and this is a big but, to make that happen, humanity has to fulfill something called conditions of indemnity. Now, indemnity is just a fancy word for making things right. It's about paying a price, to reverse past mistakes and kind of cleanse ourselves from the fallout of the fall. So how does that work? Well, it all boils down to two key steps, or foundations. First, you've got the foundation of faith. This happens when a central person makes some kind of symbolic offering to God that shows their total faith. But the second step, the foundation of substance, is where things get really interesting. This is a relational test. It requires a Cain-type person to genuinely love and unite with an Abel-type person. We're going to see exactly what that means in a second, but you've got to remember this two-step pattern. It is the key to this entire story. So let's see how this all played out in the real world. The very first shot at laying these foundations, according to the text, started right at the beginning with Adam's family.
Now you might be wondering, why couldn't Adam just make the offering himself? Well, this interpretation says that because of the fall, Adam was kind of stuck in the middle, connected to both good and evil. So to make a clean break for the offering, God symbolically split those two sides between his sons. Cain, the older brother, represented the side that needed fixing, and Abel, the younger son, stood on God's side as the connection back to him.
And believe it or not, step one, it worked. The text says, God accepted Abel's sacrifice. And just like that, boom, Abel successfully laid the foundation of faith for his entire family. But then step two failed, and not just a little bit, it was a catastrophe. Instead of loving Abel, Cain killed him. According to this teaching, this wasn't just murder, it was a symbolic repeat of the original fall, where the archangel failed to love Adam. The foundation of substance was completely shattered, and the first attempt to fix everything was over.
So fast forward 1600 biblical years. The text says God basically hits the reset button on a global scale. He starts a new providence with a new central figure, a man who stands in the position of a second Adam, Noah. Now for Noah to lay the foundation of faith, his offering was this incredible act of pure obedience. Can you imagine spending 120 years building a giant boat while everyone around you is probably laughing at you? Well, he did it. And with that, he successfully established that first foundation.
And the 40 days of the flood? That's seen as an indemnity period. It was a time to symbolically wash the world clean, creating a fresh start so that Noah's family could have a shot at building that second foundation. Okay, this is where the story gets really, really interesting. After the flood, Noah's son Ham does something that to us today sounds, a little strange. The text forces us to ask, why on earth would feeling shame about nakedness be considered a sin? Well, the source explains it like this. Before the fall, Adam and Eve felt zero shame. Their innocence was a sign of their pure connection to God. So Noah, as the new Adam, was supposed to restore that state. When his son Ham, who was the Abel figure here, saw his father and felt shame, the text says he was symbolically siding with the fallen world's perspective, not God's original innocence. And just like that, the foundation of substance failed again. So we've had two major failures. Now the providence moves to Abraham, and in this teaching, the third time is the charm. Or at least it's supposed to be. This attempt is presented as absolutely decisive. The whole trial gets more complicated, and the stakes are raised way, way higher.
Abraham's journey to get that first foundation laid is just packed with drama. He actually fails his first offering because he doesn't cut the birds in two, which is seen as a failure to symbolically separate good from evil. So to make up for that mistake, he has to pay a much higher price.
He's given this incredibly difficult test, the command to offer his own son Isaac. His absolute, unquestioning willingness to go through with it is seen as the ultimate victory of faith. He passes the test, and the foundation of faith is finally restored.
Okay, so the foundation of faith is finally secure, passed down from Abraham to his son Isaac. The stage is set. The final decisive test for the foundation of substance, the one that had already failed twice, now rested on the shoulders of Isaac's two sons. In this round, Jacob is our able figure, representing God's side. But he couldn't just sit back and inherit the role. The text shows him actively fighting for it. He has to secure the birthright from his older brother Esau, and, in that famous story, literally wrestle with an angel to get a blessing. And this is the moment where everything finally changes. After decades of struggle and being in exile, Jacob comes home, probably expecting the fight of his life with his brother. But instead of a fight, he gets this. Right here in this moment, Esau, the Cain figure, does what no one before him could. He willingly, lovingly submits to Jacob, the able figure. He embraces him. According to this text, that one act of love and unity finally fulfilled the condition. The cycle was broken. For the first time in this whole long, drawn-out providence, the foundation of substance was successfully laid, creating what's called a family-level foundation for the Messiah. Whew. So after following this epic, multi-generational story of failure and ultimate success, what are we supposed to take away from it all? Well, the source material points to several key principles that emerge from this whole pattern. So a few big ideas really stand out. First, God's plan isn't a one-way street. It's a partnership that requires human responsibility. Second, the end goal is set in stone, but the people chosen to get there aren't. If one person fails, the plan gets delayed, the conditions get tougher, but God finds someone else. And finally, Jacob's whole journey, all his struggles and his final victory, is presented as a roadmap, a model for how to overcome these spiritual challenges by finding and uniting with that able figure. And that kind of brings us to our final thought for today. This entire story is a constant dance between a determined divine goal and the often unpredictable choices of human beings. It really makes you wonder, within this kind of framework, where does God's sovereign plan end and our own free will begin? Definitely something to chew on. Thanks for joining me for this one.